glad to be with y'all today. I will be talking to you about inclusive tech and inclusive product design. So the first thing I want to talk about is the why behind this work. At the end of the day, everyone wants to feel seen. It's a core human need. We want to feel seen by our pets, our partners, and definitely our products. And so when you think about inclusion in product design, it's really about allowing everyone, when they use a product or service, to feel like they were thought of in the moment and throughout the product design and development process. And so I wanted to show you a quick spot from Etsy, which I think really encompasses what it means to really help someone feel seen. So if we could play the video, please.
Don't worry, they're gonna love you.
Oh my God, you mean it? Hey, I thought y'all got lost or something. Daughter, did you put some kettle in the oil? Oh, thank you.
We didn't forget about you. Welcome to the family. Thank you. Wow. I love it.
All right, so I don't think y'all could see the video. You could just hear the audio. Is that right? All right, well, I'll try to describe it for you. So basically, it's a couple that comes to one of the partners' homes for the holidays. He's clearly a bit nervous because it's his first time going. And as he's coming to the house, one of the partner's fathers says, "We didn't forget about you, welcome to the family." And he has a customized gift for him. And I think it really encompasses a few things. First, I think Etsy did a really great job of showing an intersectional family, right? So intersectionality is a coin termed by Kimberly Crenshaw, which talks about how the intersections of identity start to overlap and affect how someone moves through the world. So in this video, you see a Black gay couple coming home and really having the family help them feel seen. I also wanted to share some kind of baseline language. So if you're new to the DEI space or inclusive product design space, you may have heard people throw words around like equality, equity, et cetera. And I just wanted to give a quick kind of descriptor of why these two things are different. So here you're seeing two pictures. On the top, you see equality. You see four people, right? Four different people with the same type of bike. And so the person all the way to the left is in a wheelchair, obviously cannot use that bike. The second person is very tall, and so you can see that they're kind of crouching on the bike. The third person, it looks like they're good with the bike, it works for them. And then the fourth person is shorter, and so they're kind of reaching to sit on the bike. When you look at the bottom page, it's equity, right? So you see that basically each bike is retrofitted for each person, right? So you see that the first one is retrofitted for someone with a wheelchair. The second one is much taller. The third one stays as is. And the fourth one is shorter. And so when we're talking about inclusive product design, we're really trying to focus on equity, right? We want to meet people where they are. We don't want a one-size-fits-all, a product or service. We really want to help them feel seen by understanding their lived experiences, right? It's not helpful to give everyone the same bike in this, right? Only one person actually is able to use it in the way it was intended. And so when we're thinking about inclusive product design, we really want to meet people where they are. And so you may be wondering when I keep saying, diversity, equity, inclusion, dimensions of identity, what do I mean? And so here are some of the dimensions that we like to look at when we're thinking about inclusive and equitable product design. So things like race, gender, geography, ability, et cetera. And then also the intersections of those dimensions. So when I'm working with product teams, a lot of times I say, I'm a Black woman who's left-handed, and it's not like I'm Black on Monday, left-handed on Tuesday, and a woman on Wednesday, right? I'm all of those things all of the time. It affects how I move through the world, it affects how the world views me, and it definitely affects how I interact with products and services. And so if, for example, I'm using scissors, hopefully only being left-handed is what's important, right? Hopefully being Black and a woman are not coming into play when I'm using scissors. But if I'm trying to use a phone to unlock, right, for security, being Black and a woman are going to intersect. And so it's really important that we think really holistically, right, about our consumers and our customers when we're building products and services. And so I also wanted to share this quote, which is one of my favorites, that says, if you do not intentionally, deliberately, and proactively include, you will unintentionally exclude. And a lot of times when we're building products and services, it's not like we're trying to exclude people on purpose, right? But if we're not really intentional about saying, who else? Who else needs to be in the room? Who else's perspectives do we need? We're going to unintentionally exclude, right? We all have bias. That's okay, right? We have to make mental shortcuts to move through the world. But what you want to do is make sure that you're intentional about understanding and naming your biases and figuring out how, at critical points in the product development and design process, you can bring those perspectives that have historically been at the margins into the center. And so I wanted to kind of ground this in the finance industry, right? We're seeing that a lot of people are starting to talk more about the gaps, right, with these different historically marginalized groups. We're also seeing that there's a ton of opportunity, which I'll talk about in a few slides. But again, thinking about different dimensions that you may not have thought of when you're thinking about your products or services, whether it's age, whether it's gender, whether it's ethnicity, right? And starting to think about how you can start to kind of bring that into your product development and design process. Wanted to share some stats. Again, I think it's really important that people start to parse data a little bit differently than they probably have before. A lot of times people say, you know, we've looked at this and X% of the population thinks this way. The harm in that is that a lot of times with historically marginalized groups, they're not part of that majority. And so you're not actually getting the perspectives from that potential new customer. And so I wanted to share some of these stats that hopefully you haven't seen before, but it's really important, again, to start to think about the dimensions of identity that you may not have otherwise thought about and really start to bring those into your development and design process. I also wanted to talk about intent versus impact. A lot of times when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, people say, assume good intent. And I think that that's important, but I think we also need to move from intent to impact, right? Thinking of going back to that quote, unintentionally excluding. Of course it's unintentional, but the impact is still the same, right? And I think, especially for y'all being in the finance industry, there's a lot of opportunity to really transform people's lives, right? To start to kind of shift balances of power and things like that. And so it's really important to think about the impact and not just the intent. I also wanted to share the business case for inclusion. So I think a lot of times when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's really about the moral case and the human case, which is very important. But there's also a ton of opportunity on the table when you start to think about these groups that have historically been marginalized. And so what I've found in research is that people are more likely to act in the way that you want them to when they see themselves reflected. And so when they see themselves reflected in marketing, when they see themselves in commercials, when they see themselves, in store, they start to take the action that you want the consumer to take. And so you're seeing here a bunch of different groups, right, who are more likely to take the action that you want to take if you show them a beautiful and positive kind of representation of who they are. I also wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into what this looks like in practice. And so, again, I've been working in the tech industry for over a decade, and really product inclusion, equity, and design is really about thinking about the key points in the product design and development process and where you can bring that inclusive lens. And so what you're seeing here, and sorry, it's a little bit of like an eye chart, but you're seeing all the different places in the product design and development process where you can start to ask, who else, and bring that inclusive lens. So it starts all the way at team composition, right? So if you look around your team or your office and everyone is very similar, you're actually going to more likely to get very homogenous results and very homogenous ideas, right? If I have a team that all comes from Boston like me, all went to the same school, right? We're all going to be thinking pretty similarly. But if you start to bring different perspectives into your team composition, there may be more friction when you're trying to get to an end goal, but what happens is you start to reimagine all of the possibilities and get to a better outcome. So team composition is the first, but as you can see, this really cascades throughout the end-to-end process. One of the things I found in my research is that there are 4 main points in the process where if you really think about inclusive and equitable design, you're more likely to have a disproportionately positive output. And those 4 points are the ideation, user research and design, user testing, and marketing phases. And even though this was based on tech, this is actually applicable in most industries, right? So, you always, before you launch a new product or service, are going to have some sort of idea, right? You're going to have to do some research to find out if there's product market fit. You're going to do some prototyping or testing, and then obviously you have to have some sort of storytelling, right, around the product that you've created. And so if you take anything away from this presentation, I would encourage you to think about what of those 4 points, right, ideation and user research, user testing or marketing, you can start to ask who else, right? Who else needs to be in the room? Who's been excluded? And really think about how you can bring those voices into the development and design process. I also wanted to come with some receipts, right? I'm talking to you about the importance of DEI, the importance of bringing that inclusive lens. I also wanted to show you that this is a huge opportunity from a business standpoint, right? So what you're seeing here are a bunch of different stats from different historically marginalized groups, right? You're seeing trillions of dollars with a T of purchasing power, right? You're seeing 1 billion people in the world with a disability. And so it's really, really important for us to start to have a cognitive shift around why inclusion is important in design. You're also seeing for the newer generation, right, over 80% of Gen Z choose to shop with brands they ethically align with. And so again, it's really, really important that you authentically show that you care about groups that have historically kind of been left out of the development and design process. I also think it's important to note that there's something that's now called the new ROI, or return on influence. And what we're seeing is that a lot of these historically marginalized groups actually are leading the cultural zeitgeist, right? They're leading the trends. They're leading kind of how culture moves forward. And so you want to make sure that these groups understand that you care about them, you see them, right? And you want them to feel seen. Okay, I'm going to take a quick quiz, make sure y'all aren't sleeping. I know I'm the first person on the stage. How many of y'all have heard about the curbed cut effect? You can just raise your hand. All right, I see one. A little one? All right. I'm not going to call on you. It's okay. So the curbed cut effect is actually named after the cut in the sidewalk. It was started in the 70s in California, and it was originally made for people with wheelchairs. But if you think about who uses that cut in the sidewalk now, right? People with skateboards, strollers, shopping carts, suitcases. We all use that cut in the sidewalk. And the curbed cut effect means that when you build for the margins, you get the center for free. And that's one of my other favorite quotes. But what that means is when we build for those who have most been historically marginalized, the outcome is better for everyone, right? Not just that historically marginalized group that you're building for. Again, curb cut started for people with wheelchairs. Actually, everyone uses it. Another great example of the curbed cut effect is closed captioning, right? Closed captioning was started for people who were deaf or hard of hearing, but I know sometimes I'm trying to watch TV late, I'll put closed captioning on so I don't wake people up, right? I have friends who have young children, they use it when the baby's napping, right? So again, it's not just about building for that historically marginalized group. What we find is when you build for the historically marginalized group, you actually have better outcomes for everyone. All right, I think this is a second video. We'll see if this one plays. Yeah.
For transgender people, a secure payment doesn't mean protecting yourself from someone buying sneakers with your card. No, if you're transgender, a secure payment means paying for something without being judged, questioned, disrespected, humiliated, harassed, even assaulted, simply because the name on your card doesn't match how you identify. This is about more than just keeping a card safe. It's about keeping us safe. True Name by MasterCard, the first card that allows you to display your chosen name because that's who you truly are.
So I wanted to show that video to show you that people are starting to think about this in the finance industry. Again, it goes back to allowing everyone to feel seen and to be move it through the world in the way that they want to. And so I think that that example is super powerful. You're also seeing, again, this pop up in a lot of different places. So you're seeing companies start to think about historically marginalized groups and how they can show up for them in those moments that matter, right? So we just talked about the True Name, right? Citi is also doing that. New Bank is really thinking about the unbanked. Again, socioeconomic status is one of the core 13 kind of dimensions that we think about. And so how do you start to think about those who have historically been left out of the banking system all the time? And then Wealthsimple, knowing that millennials want to invest, right? Again, age is definitely a key demographic to start to think about. And I share these to share that there are multiple kind of paths that you can take, right? And there's a ton of opportunity on the table. And so it's really, again, about asking who else, sitting around with your teams and thinking about what perspectives are missing and how you can get that into your process. And so wanted to share a few kind of tips and tricks to start to think about this. So thinking about how you communicate, right? You want to communicate authentically. A lot of times my team says build for everyone with everyone. I think the with everyone piece is really important because we don't want to assume we know what people need without asking them. I used to have a teammate who said, if you're talking about them, there better be some theys in the room. And that's something that I think about all the time, right? We all come with our own lived experiences and walks of life. And so it's important to be humble. We don't know everything, right? And so how do we get those perspectives at the table? Thinking about accessibility, right? And thinking about how we can build with an accessible kind of lens. Again, the curved cut effect, that's going to benefit everyone, not just people with disabilities. Thinking about education and confidence, thinking about how you can empower people is really important, right? People don't want to feel like they're a charity case or you're doing it just because you have to do it. How do you authentically show up for people and help them feel like this is a priority for you? And then thinking about the financial gaps, right? We saw some gaps and opportunities with the Latinx community as an example. But again, there are tons of opportunities to really start to say, I see you, I see that there's opportunity, and I want to kind of meet you where you are.